I'm Sarah Coakley, Norris House Professor of Divinity at the University of Cambridge and an honorary canon of Ely Cathedral. One of my concerns as a professional theologian and priest is to draw a wide range of people into public conversations about the relation of science, philosophy, and religion. Today, modern secular science constantly throws up for us big and complex questions about how we should view the cosmos and our own evolutionary world, and what implications these questions might have for how we behave ethically, and indeed about whether we think there is a God responsible for creation at all. On Saturday, October the 15th this year, I shall be chairing a full morning of discussion at Ely Cathedral focused on the work of 3 of my current postdoctoral students at Cambridge who work at the interface of natural science, philosophy, and theology. They are centrally concerned with some of these big questions and have been involved in the last couple of years in a fascinating new experiment. They have been placed as young scholars of philosophy and religion alongside top-rate scientists at Cambridge to forge critical new discussions about neuroscience, evolution, and cosmology, and their relation to philosophy, ethics, and religion. Each has chosen a challenging topic to discuss with you on October the 15th, and I'm inviting them now to tell you what they plan to cover.
Some people think that neuroscience has shown that we don't really have free will. We may think we do, but when we look at what's happening in the brain, say when we voluntarily move our arm, some doubt is thrown on the matter. But can this be right? In my presentation, I'm going to discuss 2 arguments which I hope will demonstrate that free will isn't threatened after all. Both of these arguments are sort of brain teasers themselves, enjoyable points for discussion. And the first argument, call it the inhibited sneeze theory of free will. I show that neuroscience experiments on free will, like the famous ones of Benjamin Libet, make use of a confused conception of what free will is. Libet holds that while humans don't have free will, they do have free won't. I argue Libet's theory is mistaken. Why? Because his view implies that free will is more like an inhibited sneeze than a voluntary movement. And this is certainly an incorrect picture of free will, as I understand it. I call my second argument the illusion of doing neuroscience. I argue that if neuroscience shows conscious voluntary actions are illusory, then doesn't this imply that neuroscientists are under the illusion of voluntarily doing neuroscience? If I'm right, then what neuroscientists should really be saying is that neuroscience is under the illusion of demonstrating that free will is an illusion. And I don't think defenders of free will need to be worried about illusory refutations of free will. Taken together, I think arguments of this kind show us that neuroscience does not disprove free will, and that's very important for all sorts of areas of life: personal relations, ethics, law, politics, and not least, the question of God. Do come along and argue this through with me.
Have you ever thought about whether human moral instincts and goals might have their evolutionary bases in animal life and thus somehow be encoded in our genes? Meerkats, for instance, are highly social animals. They live in groups together, they feed together throughout their entire lives, they groom each other, and they defend each other, and they even raise each other's children. Evolution, despite often being viewed as a ruthlessly individualistic competition, has produced forms of cooperation like this. And examples are not limited to meerkats. From the famously gregarious social insects, ants, wasps, and termite colonies, to packs of wolves, elephant herds, mole rat colonies, and even multicellular organisms considered as colonies of cooperating cells. Cooperation is a winning strategy. Could human social life also have been influenced by the same evolutionary pressures that lead other forms of life to cooperate? Could this even help us understand a trait that has often been thought to be peculiarly human, namely our sense of right and wrong, fairness and unfairness in how we treat one another and shape our collective society? Well, I think the answer is yes, but also no. Human action is fundamentally different from the behavior of other animals because of our capacities for self-conscious intention, memory, language, and culture. Or at least that's what I'll try to convince you of today in my talk. While we clearly need one another to accomplish the evolutionarily decisive acts of survival and successful child rearing, ethical norms press us to guide our action by values that do not necessarily have only to do with evolutionary biological needs, or the success of our genes. Today, the most pressing ethical challenges, such as overpopulation, harm to the environment, and harm to other animals, ask us to act in ways that extend whatever natural cooperative tendencies and sympathies we have far beyond our immediate family, group, or population. This tells us that while evolutionary cooperation may illuminate how many of our capacities and dispositions were acquired throughout the history of our species, ethics is about how we shape ourselves and how we shape our societies in response to the value of life. For religious believers, of course, that will vitally involve the question of God.
Have you ever wondered whether one can argue for the existence of a supernatural creator just by pointing to features of the natural world? One kind of argument like this is known as a design argument or teleological argument. Design arguments used to be all about design in biological systems, but nowadays the discussion usually focuses on physics instead. There are a number of intriguing results in modern cosmology and particle physics that can be described in highly suggestive ways. They can be described as showing that the laws of physics and the initial conditions of the universe are, so to speak, finicky when it comes to life. That is, these cosmic parameters only allow for, in some sense, tiny variations if a universe characterized by them is going to be such that life can evolve in it. In this talk, I'll consider the question of whether these fine-tuning data can, in some sense, constitute an argument for the existence of a supernatural creator. My overall aim isn't to convince you of a particular answer. Rather, what I'll try to do is I'll highlight some of the interesting and complex philosophical issues that are raised by this question, and I'll invite you to think through some of them with me so that you can decide for yourself.